Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks all for coming. So I can introduce Steve Race and he will start the talk off. Thank you.
Welcome to the launch of the Newcastle Hub. My name's Steve Race and they've given me this title of BIM Regional Ambassador and I'm working for CIC. I'll start here. Can anybody see a younger Steve Race there? Not much younger. And if anybody says, yes, I'm the one with the skirt on, no, leave now, please. No, I'm not the one with the skirt on, but I'm that one there. And that's my... Oh, have I got to stop on this spot? Oh, crikey, I like to walk around. That's my office in 1979. And the Darcy Race there, that's Dick Darcy, my partner. And prior to 79, we'd spent 5 years at Oxford Regional Health Authority developing what would now be called, in the current parlance, a BIM system. For anybody who knows the history of CAD platforms, it was called Oxys, BDS, GDS, and there still are, thank you, there's a nod there, and there still are some of those extant around the country. And it was a multi-user system used by engineers, architects, medical planners, administrators, surveyors, you name it. Anybody who was involved in hospitals could use that system. Bit of a forerunner to today's so-called BIM systems. And we were also one of the first digital contractors to Ordnance Survey, creating highly structured, quality-controlled information, which you probably now use as bases to your maps, although actually perhaps not around here you don't. We digitised the first 100 packages around Hanger Lane, gyratory in London. But from then on, you'll see us sat in some little computer stuff there. That cost £90,000 in 1979. If you extrapolate that onwards to today, that's about 550,000, 600,000. So from then to today, I've been involved in working with people to cooperate better, cooperate more, with the support of IT. In the interim years, I've been involved in quite a few national and European research projects. Look, I'm back here at Newcastle. I worked there for 8 years, creating a large-scale, long-term property database. Likewise at Stoke Mandeville. And I've been involved in teamwork, I've been involved in Avanti, I've taught young architects, I am an architect by background, young architects, management practice and law and business, and on into the future, researched into cyber law and virtual agents. So from then and before then until now, I've been thinking about this thing called BIM, and obviously at that time sort of two people borrowing that money had to think about different business strategy, different patterns of lending. You had to think how BIM was sort of going to be inserted into business strategy. We've also been thinking about processes, how we need to change processes, re-engineer processes, not just now to take into account the BIM phenomenon, but always really. And lower down the list there is technology. And once you sort of culture and business out, technology can follow on. We can create technology ad infinitum to do what you want. And I'd like to think that if you've seen this diagram, anybody seen this diagram? The BIM readiness diagram? Yes, another nod. Give that man a pay rise. I'd like to think that Darcy Race sort of played some part in moving us on from level 0, level 1 and now through to level 2. BIM's, there's quite a lot of debate about what BIM is, and sorry, I'm going a bit too fast here, aren't I, with my that's better. A lot of debate about what BIM is, and here are just a few of the definitions stroke explanations around BIM at the moment. I've actually got about 26 of them on my laptop, 26 definitions, explanations of BIM. On the left there, we've got one of the early ones from the General Services Agency in the States, and rather unfortunately, that gave a high sort of technological emphasis to BIM from the off. It talks about interoperability, it talks about intelligent objects, it talks about parametrics, and we've got to steer away from that a little bit. We've got things like the new BIM overlay to the RIBA plan of work, and it's got an explanation of BIM. We've got things like the COBE standard, which if and hopefully you are going to get involved in BIM, you'll hear a lot about in terms of a data standard for displaying information at certain work stages. We've got BS 1192. You all got a copy? All read it? Bedside reading? Like it? Love it? Intriguing plotting at BS 1190. He's nodding again. I'm getting a bit worried about you actually. Nodding at all my comments. MBS have got the national BIM specification in IFC format. Weird and wonderful things called IFCs, which I worked on for 10 years. We've got, and down at the bottom there, we've got Chuck Eastman and his seminal publication on BIM, and he opens it up a little bit. He talks about buildability, constructability, building performance, involvement of client, involvement in project life cycle. So he winds it out very much more from a sort of technological point of view. And of course, throw in a few academics, and we've got, are there any academics here? Have I overstepped them out? Have we got any academics? Oh, sorry, madam. I'll withdraw that comment. But you know, we can get more and more explanations from academia. The BIM task group, can I venture for my glass of water again, please? The BIM task group kind of went along with this idea that there are many explanations of BIM, and rather cunning in a way that it went with the tide. But it made three very important qualifications. That BIM is not just 3D, and it's not necessarily just technology based either. But there are parts of people's jobs in project lifecycle in different building typologies where 2D and an Excel spreadsheet is quite a respectable BIM. And as we all know, a lot of our work in construction is non-graphic in any case. So an important qualifier from the BIM task group. Got to get the hang of this. It's not just a new technology application. No. I mean, very often when I should say I'm also delivering the RIBA's CPD programme on BIM. And very often when I ask what does BIM mean to you, people say Revit. Well, no, it's not any particular software platform, not singling Revit out. No, it's not Bentley, it's not ArchiCAD, it's not Allplan, it's not Vectorworks, it's not any particular technology platform. But it is now, and it's happening now. So there's no point in saying, well, we'll tackle BIM next week, or we'll tackle it next project that comes along, or we'll do it in 6 months' time. It is here, it is now. So three important qualifiers. And the BIM task group went on even further and issued, I mean, I've been at this now nearly 40 years, and Egan and Lathan made their contributions, but in my view, this is one of the most powerful statements to come out of government in my lifetime. And it's this one at the bottom. Government as a client can derive significant improvements in cost, value, carbon performance through the use of open, shareable asset information. And it's that open, shareable asset information phrase that is the most important of all. That means has fantastic opportunities, fantastic implications for our businesses, for our projects, for processes, for our legal models and so on. All summed up very neatly, I think, in those four words. So, after all that, I still am going to venture my own explanation and say that BIM-like beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. And it's an outlook. It's an outlook on your business, your organisation, your project team, your project, the built environment outcomes that you expect. And I've got a little explanation here saying it is an outlook on any project, whatever its scale or duration. So I really don't care whether it's the smallest of domestic work or it's the most complicated infrastructure work. BIM principles are scalable. They are scalable for any size of project, any size of business. And I don't care about its duration either. It can be a day, a week, a month, a year, a lifetime, ongoing, on into the future, as some big property portfolios are. And the individuals and organisations who embark on BIM should simply use the most cooperative methods possible and aim for the highest quality information asset for the project. Now, I didn't even mention the word technology there, and I didn't mention any Ds, 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, any number of Ds that you like. It's just a simple thing. I wouldn't call myself a BIM expert. All I've been doing all my career is helping people manage their information as cooperatively as possible. And good. I'm getting the hang of this. Most cooperative methods, for example, there are more positive forms of contract out there. NEC3, JCT, Constructing Excellence, Strategic Forums, IPT forms of contract. There are various partnership and framework contracts out there, some of which haven't been used in a fairly cooperative way. They've been used in an old adversarial way, but they could be used in a positive way. So just the most positive and most comfortable legal arrangements you can find. Integrate the processes means integrating work packages, means you've got joined up information, means that there's no information falling down the gaps. Be more open and transparent. We've got to get over the blame culture in a lot of what we do. We've got to trust each other more. Project insurance is not new. It's been around a while, but I guess I and a colleague gave a BIM talk to 18 underwriters at Lloyd's a couple of months ago, and the idea of project insurance was already there in the underwriters, but they're quite interested in moving it on, and I guess in the BIM environment we might see its ascendancy. And important, very important indeed, is look for the right sort of people, the cooperative people, the positive people, and they are there. Highest quality information asset. What's the client's information requirements? And remember, in this case, the client is the government. And what's its information requirement? That's top of the list, high priority. But also think about what is the information requirement of everybody in the project team. Don't just do the old thing of chucking it all on a DWG and hoping that everything's there that anybody wants. And these things at the bottom, use PAS 1192, which I'll go on about in a minute, and things like Uniclass and CISFB. Okay. So, honing in on the hubs. It's unfair, isn't it? Making a Yorkshireman say hubs, 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 all the time, hubs. Is there an H on it? Oh, hubs, hubs, there is an H on it. What's the purpose of the hubs? Ooh. Well, the big picture is to get to what is being called BIM Readiness Level 2, that red line there. But historically, as I've already sort of hinted at from that 1979 slide, we started out with paper, emails came along, 2D CAD came along, we had difficulty assimilating that into what we do. A lot of people simply use 2D CAD to produce a sheet of paper, which was passed on to somebody else who took that sheet of paper and used it as their CAD input. And there's very little sort of coordination, cooperation, benefit and impact at all at that stage. Eventually, things like 3D came along, not just for visualizations, but for all kinds of other things, scheduling, environmental analysis, structural analysis, and more importantly, some of these things. CPIC, I was privileged to be one of the 2 lead consultants on the Avanti project, which was a 3-year project sort of supporting people on cooperation using IT. BS 1192, I've sat on that committee on and off for a long, long time. And these things came along and gave us the ability to structure our information better. And that's what we've got to do even more in level 2. So the purpose of the hubs is to help people get to level 2. And how pragmatically, practically on the ground can we do that? Well, there is this thing in the middle, PAS 1192. And it's a standard demonstrating how to structure information, demonstrating how to give information various statuses as it moves through various stages. And if we just adopted that, alone, if 80 or 90% of the industry adopted that single thing, there would be a sea change, an absolute sea change. And I, very often at this stage, take a drink, and also make an analogy with the banking system. The banking industry is a fiercely competitive industry, but you can take your card and put it in an ATM machine all around the world, practically, and get your money out. And why? Because despite being fiercely competitive, the banks have got together and agreed some data standards and an information standard and a common language that allows you to get your card, stick your card in a Barclays machine and get your money out of a NatWest account, if there's any there at the moment. So we seem to be unable to do that in construction, but this go on, thank you. This PAS 1192 is the key to being able to do that, and I really do not know why people do not pick that up. It's out there, it's cheap. When people say BIM costs a lot of money, no it doesn't. Just buy this. I'm not sure how much it'll cost, but the old BS 1192 costs about £102 on Amazon. And so for that kind of expenditure, you could look after your information and make a better information asset altogether. Yes, and adopt some of these things, the more collaborative forms of contract. Use this thing, Uniclass. And yes, squeeze absolutely every ounce out of whatever software platform you've got. It really doesn't matter. If you structured your information along these PAS lines and talked to other members of the project team, that is a step forward in terms of managing information in the project team. And there's a sort of old saying that 90% of people use 10% of the functionality of the software, and that's probably true of a lot of CAD platforms. So make that 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% if you possibly can. And there's a big cross at the moment through level 3. We aren't going there. We're not asking for radical change at all. We're not asking for radical change in a legal basis, a technological basis, anything like that. Because actually, these hubs around the country are your opportunity to get involved in how level 3 is shaped. And that's what the BIM Task Group wants. So we're not going to level 3 at the moment, even though it was put on the original diagrams. Okay, and we're here in the hubs to sort of allay fears, think about misconceptions and turn this into a happier, sort of more comfortable experience. Quite a few, one or two of the main misconceptions there is BIM expensive. No, it's not. I've just said that in terms of PAS 1192. If you bought that for 100 quid, it doesn't have to cost a lot at all. What is the benefit? Well, the benefit in being involved in the hub is having the opportunity to shape the way things will be in the future. Only required on projects over a certain capital value? No, it's not. As I've said, BIM principles are scalable. You can use it on any scale of project whatsoever. And how will BIM affect SMEs? I hope well, actually, because SMEs, very often, and I've been an SME myself, that little group of 6 people grew to 45 people eventually. Darcy Race was 45 people, so I've been an SME myself. And SMEs can very often adjust quicker than some of the bigger boys can, in some respects. So, we want to include everybody, include the supply chains, facilitate a regional collaborative activity so everybody in the supply chain is brought along in this BIM initiative. There will have to be some learning done, and hopefully that's one of the things that will come out of this hub activity. What needs to be learnt? How can we help people learn it? Can we develop a learning package? Competence and capabilities, we need to build a good level of BIM competence and capability in the supply chains and ensure that that level is maintained and it's good quality and that it's developed further on. Companies of any size can participate in the BIM hub, no barriers to anybody. And it's important that we get the supply chain contributing to this project information asset, because out there, for example, product manufacturers. Are there any product manufacturers here? No. No. Okay. I can say what I like about product manufacturers then, can't I? I wasn't going to say what I like about. Product manufacturers know a lot more about their products than I as an architect does. So their information, their well-chosen information is important to that project information asset, very often downstream in terms of operations and maintenance and recycling property portfolios. We want the hubs to be a two-way street between the BIM task group, and the hubs. We want sort of consistent, clear messages, clear communications between the two. There will be things coming out from the BIM task force, which will be of interest to us, I'm absolutely certain. And by the same token, the BIM task group needs to hear from us as to what we think, because remember, we're having a stake in moulding that level 3 readiness. Whoops. The CIC is a facilitator for this activity. It wants the hubs to sit alongside whatever else is going on in CIC in this region, complementary activities, no thoughts of consuming or subsuming or anything like that. It's positive. Remember, we have really got to be excellent paradigms of cooperation. We need to learn and share and learn between within the hub and between hubs. We need to keep it open, transparent and cooperative in whatever we do. And share. What can we share? How can we do that? Again, simply, practically, pragmatic, on the ground. Quite a bit of self-help probably needed. But little things like just go and meet the hub next door, the next regional hub, or get yourselves a sort of knowledge matrix or expertise matrix, and decide where the gaps are, what you want to do, how you want to carry it forward, where you want to fill the gaps in. Little things. We're not asking for big revolutionary things at all. Little things like posting 5 bullet points to the BIM task group. Again, just a sentence or two. Very simple. We've done this. We've contacted such and such. We've improved so and so. Would be greatly helpful. If all the hubs around the country do that, we'll have an enormous knowledge bank to draw upon. And yes, use your local associations, organisations, professional organisations, use this hub network to spread out and use all the membership for the CIC membership. I quite like this diagram. I keep this in all the lectures and CPD sessions I do. I found it in a Quaker bookshop in St Giles in Oxford, where I'm based. It was a mug, a tea towel and a postcard set, and I scanned the postcard and doctored the slogans for our industry. We're about here at the moment. We've been here for centuries. Well, decades and decades. We're here at the moment, just wondering how we can get to here and here. But we've got to do away with this chap, and there are ways and means of doing that. I mean, sorry, I'm not talking about concrete wellies or anything like that. I mean, legitimate ways of getting rid of that chap. But we've got to instigate, and these hubs are a tremendous opportunity to instigate a different cultural outlook, and that behavioural change is absolutely necessary if we're going to keep a place in a global marketplace. Oops. There's a couple of views on BIM, and Pat, are you gesturing to me, John, or am I running over time? Okay. There are a couple of views when you look on BIM, and people are seeing different things, and because of some of those early descriptions and early definitions, very often all of us, and I include everybody really in the supply chain, are thinking about it in a technological sense, but the government is not. It's thinking about it in an information sense. The government has to make business decisions for us on our behalves, and to be able to do that, it needs good quality, focused information. So it is that view on BIM that must take priority. What does a typical hub look like? I'm not putting sequins on for anybody, actually. I won't do it. And I'm not bearing my chest for anybody either. But there's got to be sort of a certain amount of consistency and diversity, both at the same time. Consistency, in the sense that we want a simple, non-bureaucratic structure to the hubs. It should have a chairperson, sorry, must be PC, chairperson. I understand that one or two hubs are up and running already. There might be a hub chairman. If not, it'll be regional chairman. Perhaps that situation stays. Perhaps there is a hub chairman appointed later on. But a chairperson there is. And each hub should have its own website. I think we've got those up and running now. And the minimum of reporting. But apart from that, anybody and everybody can be involved in the hub, and you can see Uncle Tom Cobley behind there. And what we'd like, again, simple things, what we'd like the hubs to do is make sure you've got all the contacts, and please canvass anybody who you want to join, new people. Make sure everybody knows everybody. Going to have to be a certain amount of self-help in terms of accumulating resources to support the activity. Case studies again would be fantastic to build this knowledge bank behind the hub and across hubs. Again, we're not asking for tomes in case studies, just a sort of brief outline of what the project is, who's involved, what the BIM aspiration was it met, how was it met, wasn't it met, and please don't be bashful about telling us when things went wrong. Nobody's going to laugh. We want to know, because in many respects they're always the most crucial things to know about. So just some simple case studies, an events calendar from each hub, and out of some of those case studies we might get some fact sheets which can be helpful to the other members of the supply chain, and perhaps contribute to that sort of educational capacity for the supply chain. And let's have surgeries, perhaps smaller things, smaller meetings between perhaps 2 or 3, 4, 5 members of the hub, and I think I'm mandated and happy to come along to those. I'd certainly like to, because I want to get amongst you and meet you and work with you. And as I said, every hub is going to have has got its website, and you can see the emphasis we've placed on London there. This is not to be viewed as a London-centric exercise at all. We want it to be completely national. And finally, this guy in sort of 2003, I'll take a sort of leaf out of his book. Clive Woodward said, let's look for the percentages, the 1%, the 0.5%, the 1/4%, because they all add up. He looked at ballet for rugby players, he looked at psychology, he looked at psychiatry, he looked at vision, he looked at body language. He looked anywhere where he could get that small percentage gain, and that's what we've got to do. We can do it. And so finally, I'll say to the hubs, ladies and gentlemen, off we go. I'm looking forward to working with as many of you as possible. I'd like to get around physically, as it were, but we'll have quite a strong virtual presence on Twitter, LinkedIn and the websites, so I'd like to be working with you on into the next few months. I'm absolutely passionate about this. As I said at the beginning, this is one of the best opportunities I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I want to work with you to make it work. Thank you very much.
I'm David Philp. I'm Head of BIM Implementation at the Cabinet Office, and we're delighted to be here this afternoon supporting both the Construction Industry Council and indeed the Construction Industry Council in the North East. As John said, there's a rich presence of BIM already here. And what's today about? Well, for us, it's it's to start to socialise. What does government think about BIM? Why are we doing it? What does that value proposition look like? And where are we going in terms of our journey to date? I think one of the things that Steve mentioned, for us, it's very much the hubs. What's about? It's very much about learning, sharing, and connecting. And I think one of the key messages that came out from Steve, it's also about trying to unify as well. It's about trying to join the dots. It's not about trying to consume who's already within that area. One of the things that Steve said, what is BIM? It means many different things to many different people. And what we find out is they're not all wrong. I think as Steve said, one of the first things that's easier for us to do is sometimes say what BIM isn't. And for us as a government client, it's very much about the data within the models. We're very data-centric. And for us, it's the data, how that can help to answer some key questions for government. But it's also allowing us to make smarter decision-making process. And that's what it kind of boils down. We can use that data, we can use the geometry during that business process to make smarter decisions and ultimately help us create better assets. And by doing that, we'll start to make better outcomes as well. What we're saying is we don't want better models, but we want better outcomes to happen. We want better hospitals, better schools, and that's really what it's about. For us, people say, what is it? Is it a technology? Is it a process? For us, the main thing, and Steve mentioned it, it's about behavioural change. This is very much for us, it's a way of thinking, that's smart thinking. And BIM, if you like, the main thing about it for us, it's not a linear process, it's that complete 360-degree process, not just thinking about the creation of the asset, but right through in terms of how we care about it. And it's very much about purpose-driven as well. I think one of the things we do stand out in the UK is we're doing BIM for a reason. It does have purpose to what we're doing. I was at a convention a while back, and there was a guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, I think it was Ben Hunt Davis. He'd been in the Sydney Olympics. He was an 8-man Cox crew, and he talked about his journey. That's 4 years in terms of the Olympics, and it had a real purpose for him. Every day when him and his team got up, they always asked the question, will it make the boat go faster? They defined the purpose, it was very purpose-driven. They wanted to live the purpose, and they always asked the question, is it going to do that? Is it going to help if I eat this, if I have a pint of Guinness? Is it going to make my boat go faster? So it was very much for them, starting with the end in mind. What was the goal? And for us, it's very much how do we give that customer that better asset? And always asking that question, looking at the data, looking at the model, trying to say, is it going to help us realise that goal at the end of the day? So for us, very much a mindset, a way of thinking. It's also about the process, and it's right down at the bottom, it's very much still a bit about the technologies as well. For us, very simple assertion is about value creating collaboration. I think that's a great thing about the hubs. Bring like-minded people together, have that great discussion, share the information, and great things happen. Well, what's a campfire got to do with it? I think very much in the BIM world, we've now got that electronic campfire, the model. You know, it's not about lonely BIM, having a model somewhere that the designer, the architect, the engineer's looking at. It's starting to bring it together, bring it around the supply chain, the FM contractor, starting to make smart decisions using the model and that information within it. And it's very much a global conversation. Round about the world, there's the same things going on. BIM is very much front and centre. We've travelled a fair bit in the last while. We're over in Denmark over 2 weeks ago. We've been over America. We've been speaking to Chinese, trying to understand where are they on their journey. And we're all after one thing. It's like trying to get better efficiency and better assets. And I think the thing that stands the UK out by a mile is the fact that we are starting to think, not just in terms of design and construct, but the whole BIM to FIM, starting to think about the asset operation and how we can start to get those better assets, start to optimise how we actually run our assets. Today, the BIM Task Group, we're actually out with the CIC's Ambassador Richard Saxon over in Brussels as well, trying to create BIM, the UK standard, make it the very much best in class throughout Europe. So it is happening, it's very much real. Wherever we go as well, it always comes to, when we speak to clients especially about BIM, it's certainly the same within government, the why, it's always the same ills. We didn't get what we wanted, there's inherent disappointment. The asset, well, it wasn't what we were getting, and it didn't perform the way we wanted it as well. It didn't meet that need. The other thing we see as well is the baton is often dropped between construction and operational. Trying to get all that data set right the way through. It can often take up to a year, a team of 6 people recoding, if you like. So what does that mean? It means for a department that asset is not running efficiently for at least a year. So BIM, if you like, is to try and ameliorate those ills. How can we help make sure our customers can get the asset they want to make smarter life cycle decisions, and we can start to get all that data right through that 360-degree process, making those smarter decisions as we go. And I'm sure most of you know Paul Morrell, our Chief Construction Advisor. Paul says, well, what are the key drivers? Why are we doing this? Well, the first one, the inconvenient truth, is down to cost. We need to get better value in terms of assets we're doing, both in terms of CapEx and OpEx. Cost is very much king. As part of the government construction strategy, we are trying to save between 15 and 20%, which BIM is part of. It's not BIM in isolation. A big part of it, how do we become more efficient? And also the other part is carbon. How can we help use BIM to make smarter decisions round about our carbon agenda? Paul's words, not mine. This is also about integration. We've lived in silos for many, many years. How do you use BIM? We say this is a behavioural change. How do you use that to start integrating people together? And for me, the key part of this is not just about bringing designers and contractors together, but the key part is how do we start bringing the FM, the operator of these assets, bringing them into the loop as well. Not just a bolt on at the end, but very much right up at the front. And that's key to what we're wanting to do. Bring that entire asset life cycle and that team together. So it's about bringing teams together, new smart processes in terms of what we're doing. And I think it's fair to say we're also starting to enter that digital renaissance as well. And I think that's the thing. Industries starting to become better at using data. You look at other industries in terms of how they perform. You can buy your £3 book off Amazon. You can pretty much trace it right across the road till it gets your doorstep. But at the same time, in terms of construction, we can order £10 million of curtain wall from Switzerland. We have no idea where it is. We don't have the data that backs it up. But we're starting to get better data now, starting to make smarter decisions. I think the other thing as well is data starting to come everywhere. Steve said, you go back to his picture. When was that one taken, Steve, in your? 79. 90, so you don't look at Steve, but he lied. But BIM's had a long genesis in terms of the technology that's around about it. But the thing is, these big mainframe computers live pretty much in the designer's office. And what we're starting to see now, we've all got our iPads and mobile phone, data is everywhere. You can start to take that data out in sight. And we're starting to see smarter decisions getting made right at the project coalface using that data within the models. And what we're starting to see is, people starting to use the data both at project level, and I think the other thing as well is starting to see it at business, at enterprise level as well. We'll always see great case studies of BIM around at that project level, but it's also starting to transform businesses as well. And I think if we've seen one thing probably in the last year, BIM has kind of moved from talking about it, how you put it, the technology level, to starting to become a boardroom conversation. How can it help transform my business? It is one of these levers that can help be pulled. And I think we are generally starting to enter a new digital, if you like, renaissance in terms of where we're going. Big part of it, we like to think in, was a government mandate, and I think we're starting to rock the boat to some extent. I think we're testing some of the traditional conventions within the industry as well. And to some extent, people are now seeing it as, how does it help me be more efficient? How can I take the waste out of my process, build it that 3-4 times in the model, do the waste there, but build it once flawlessly out in sight. So starting to think about new processes around about the technology and new behaviours that sit beside that one. The other thing as well, in today's current climate, everybody wants to use BIM to help try and win work. How do I get the optimised solution at bid or tender stage? And what we are seeing as well, lots of new acronyms for, we live in construction, people trying to get their head around it. And what we have discovered is people don't like 4-letter acronyms, so we're trying to get them back to 3, so lots of good feedback. But the good thing is people at last are starting to think about data management. How do we manage data? And if you think about one thing today, start go back, have a look at your own business. How do you manage that data? What sort of structure you use for managing data? As we say in terms of government, that's very much key for what we want to do. Start to think about that data set. Liz, I hope you got the receipt for this thing. BIM, why government intervention? So why is this important to government? Well, as we said, we need to be more efficient. We've got to get better value for money in terms of our assets. The harsh reality, as I said, if we don't, others will. We'll have to start to import skills, import products that are much more efficient. As you can see there on the right-hand side, hope it's on the right-hand side, Francis Maud, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, when he launched the Government Construction Strategy, taking a keen interest in our programme. We've got 4 years left in it, and we want the UK to be very much at the vanguard of BIM know-how in terms of consultants that are out, selling our wares. We work around the world, but offering these new efficiencies. And we generally like to think that we are. At this moment in time, there's a Building Smart conference going on over in the Middle East, and we saw the reports back. NBS have been blogging on it, and we saw a fantastic slide last night that we now reckon in terms of where the UK is in the world. In terms of that BIM know-how, we're sitting there, we've pushed ourselves up to terms of number 2, just behind Finland. We're starting to get a structured way of working, and that's a big thing. We can start to export the businesses we've got in the UK, and it's a big key part of what we are trying to do. So BIM, very much for us, we want to be best in class in terms of the UK. Well, what is the BIM strategy? Can I ask a question at this point? How many folk have read the Government Construction Strategy? I'd like to think that's all of it. Well done, Richard. That's, I would say, less than half. If you do one thing, even if you decide, okay, BIM is not for me, I'm not overly interested, read the Government Construction Strategy. It's how we are going to procure, our central procured assets between now and 2016. And it's not a weighty one. There's only about 18 pages in it. Steve, I hope you had your hand up there. I never noticed.
No, I just haven't.
That's okay then. But have a look. You can download it free from the website. But what you'll see is BIM starts as part of an overall government construction strategy. It's not BIM in isolation. There's lots of other things, cost benchmarking, new smarter ways of procurement, which all involve early contractor engagement, integrated project insurance. You put all these things together, and the big assertion for us, does 1 + 1 give you 3? Do we start to get better value at it? But the BIM part of it, the assertion is government wants to be good at pooling, if you like, in terms of giving that consistent standard. Government would be good at buying data as well and starting to use that data and doing it consistently. Each government department will work within the same framework. We're also trying to make sure we get a consistent push as well. We've given industry for like 4 years now to do that switch over from kind of that analogue working to digital. Start thinking about the training and start thinking about new methods and documentation that Steve mentioned, things like PAS 1192 Part 2 that underpin our programme. But the reality is we will not be telling you how to do BIM. We'll be saying that what outputs we want from it, but how you get from A to B and how you innovate will be largely up to you as a supply chain. But the key for us is we need to deliver level 2 BIM by 2016. Not from 2016, but to be top of the ramp, 100% delivered by 2016 within all central government departments. And ultimately the thing we'll be gauged upon, did we get improved value for money in those assets that we've delivered? When you go back tonight and download it, you'll see there's one profound paragraph in terms of government construction strategy. 2.32, that government require fully collaborative 3D BIM. Yeah, we do mention the word there, but the key thing for us is we want all the data in an electronic format. And that's the key part for us. We want to get our data in a structured way by 2016. So yeah, geometry helps us answer a few questions, but the big part, how do we start using that data set within there? Another key one is fully collaborative BIM. Obviously, Steve's shown what does level 2 BIM look like, And what you will start to see, level 2, that collaboration is still domain specific. It's still an architectural model, a structural model, the FM model, and it's all federated together at a point in time for a purpose. We're not at level 3 yet in the UK, and what we will perhaps see is the supply chain going even faster and striving towards that. I think the technologies will get there pretty fast, the contracts will then fall behind. The big part will be changing behaviours. It's hard enough getting people to collaborate, but getting people to fully integrate, it'll be that changing that heuristic bias. Most people look at that maturity wedge and I think, do they really get it? There's a slide if it comes up. I think this describes it quite well. You can start to see if it stays there. That, again, what we're talking about is a series of models that come together, a series of data sets that are all pulled together and brought together for a purpose. It's not that single model environment as yet. Well, what does that mean? It means from a commercial and insurance point of view, not a lot has changed. In our very first job at the MOJ, Cook and Woods, traditional JICT contract, it was very much fit for purpose. So level 2 BIM does not need a lot of ambulance chasing. There's not a lot to do. And we're in the process of finishing the UK BIM protocol that will answer all these questions around about that, and we're almost there in terms of publishing that. Lots of misconceptions around what government wants. A lot of people think, you know, it's a bit of a fad, we'll stick our head in the sand, and hey, you know, once Paul Morrell retires at the end of the year, it will be gone. This is very much part of policy now. It's very much embedded within the government departments, and it's only for jobs over 50 million, so it ain't going to affect me much. 50 million is where we started, 50 million came down to 15, came down to 5, and then Steve said, well, that value proposition's got to fit for any project. It's got to be scalable. That same value proposition, I know when I done my house extension last year, I won't say the word maybe for the VAT man, but it was around about £20,000. Done it as a BIM job, and we got value out of it. We made smarter decisions, and we got a better asset, we like to think, at the end of the day. Well, at least I got a nice big TV in it, which I hadn't planned for. So it's all jobs, and that's both new build, refurbishment, buildings such as this, and indeed infrastructure as well. It's certainly our road jobs as well. So it's got that whole scalability, so it affects everybody in the supply chain. I'm an SME, it won't affect me because I don't engage directly with government. This is a whole sector change that we're doing, and whilst you might not work directly with government, you'll be exchanging data, no doubt, with somebody in the supply chain that does, so you will have a place to play no matter where you sit. It's just 3D you want. Well, we want much more than 3D. We want the data in a structured manner, and we'll come on to that in a minute. We won't tell you how to do it. We'll give the guidance in terms of documentation, but setting up your workflows, how it fits for you as a business will be very much up to you as a supply chain. And start to innovate. As Steve mentioned, lots of standards around about the world. We launched it in early doors. If you set a standard and tell people how to do it, you'll always get the same results. So innovation very much key. And as I mentioned, level 2, you don't have to call the lawyer. It's pretty much still business as usual. We still look for 2D reviewable design outputs cut from the model. In 2016, well, as we said, that's when we want 100%. It's very much here now. The first departments are very much up and running. So if you take one thing away from today, please get started in your journey as soon as possible. We're working with industry. This isn't just government banging down and saying this is what you must do. Increasingly, one of the best things we think about this programme is we think we'll work well with industry together. This is industry that's working, I'm sure many folk within the room have been part of that journey. We have a steering group that meets once a month to make sure the oil tankers head in the right direction. We have a core team, and I see as the work package managers. We usually have about 20 work packages at any time with the very best people from industry. And that core team, again, try and make sure we're responding right. But the key thing for us is probably that middle layer, that community of practice. We've got a delivery supply group that involves the United Kingdom Contractors Group, National Federation of Builders, construction product manufacturers, specialist engineer contractors, all help us shape that programme. If that's the delivery side, we've got the same again operational in terms of government property unit, bringing together all the FM providers. So we have that complete bandwidth. And we've also got the Technology Alliance as well, all the vendors together, helping them and help us in terms of things like interoperability and trying to help realise the programme as well. And a great conversation going on with them, and they've been very supportive. Big part for me, and I think this is really, you talk about the £800 gorilla called government wanting BIM, but the other part as well, how do we start to make sure that we get an equal pool from the private sector? We're working with BIM for retail, likes of Asda, John Lewis, Waitrose, B&Q, Marks and Spencers, to help them go on a similar journey. We've got a workshop set up them in a couple of weeks. So they are very much co-destiny partners. We've also set up the BIM for private sector developers, the big pension fund ones that will trigger many private sector ones. And again, helping them go on a similar journey along with the likes of BIM for rail. So we're starting to see all these BIM for groups that we're helping try and establish to get that commonality across the UK. Education and training, big part of what we're doing as well. We're trying to create, if you like, that standard. We're working with people such as the BIM Academy to try and make sure it's something that responds to industry. We're also trying to communicate out, and this is a big part, down the bottom, the regional BIM hubs. How do we start to get consistency of approach, ensure that same message gets right out, right through all the regions? And that does include Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. We'll be setting them up within there as well. So we get that consistent message that comes right across, and hopefully it will take some of the fear out of what level 2 BIM as well. Steve's mentioned this, the investment. We do have investment in terms of this. The first part, up at the right, I don't know how well you can read it, delivery and productivity. We've tried to create our standards, and our standards have looked the common language, our data set, which is COBE UK 2012. We'll touch on that in a minute. PAS 1192 Part 2, which is how we manage the whole data set during the CapEx stage. That has now been out for public consultation. Hopefully many folk in the room have had a look at it. And that will come out formally, hopefully in the next month or so. What we have done, Steve mentioned cost. We've actually bought the copyright for that. So that will come out free of charge to industry. A bit unlike BS 1192, the £110. This will come out free. We're doing the UK BIM protocol, which we'll look at in terms of legal and commercial. So these will come out free for industry in terms of those guides and those standards. So that's also commercial and legal. Big part as well is training and education, trying to create that educational standard throughout the UK. Steve's already mentioned this. We have a very simple hypothesis that government as a client, or any client, can get better value for money in terms of that asset, right through that entire asset life cycle, but also starting to think about that carbon performance for the use of that open shareable asset information. How do you use the data to start to make smarter decisions in terms of what we're doing? Big part as well, we talk about the intelligent client, and that's a key thing for us, creating the intelligent BIM client. We see a lot of clients these days that are saying, part of their tenant inquiry, we want this thing called BIM. No rhyme or reason for it. We want to have real purpose in terms of answering English language questions that will say things like, is it going to be affordable? What does my carbon model look like? And using the data within BIM to answer a series of English language questions. And as we said, the complexity of how you do that will be very much up to the supply chain. But a smart client that's good at asking for BIM for purpose. And that's what we're trying to do with each of the government departments. The other thing as well, we are trying to change a paradigm. I hope, has anybody read Never Waste a Good Crisis? One person. Construction Excellence Report, excellent one, written by Andrew Wilson, who I think was the chair of the group that came together for it. But Andrew's assertion was very much, this is nothing new. Egan Letham have been out for many years. The technology's been kicking about. Why are we not making better life cycle decisions? Well, the simple fact is we didn't have to. We needed this economic comfort blanket to change things. The other profound thing he said within it is, well, we had this paradigm where we think about delivery life cycle, the 1, 10, 100 in terms of design, construction and operation. But the big value lies beyond delivery in terms of operational life cycle, business outcomes and business costs. How do we start using BIM to make better assets that are going to perform better for clients? We often design something, build it, and hope it's going to perform some way. BIM, if you like, through that 360-degree feedback loop, means we can start thinking about smarter business outcomes right at the start. Start thinking about better operational life cycle, and that's where the real big saving is. If you like, we get some good savings in terms of design, construct, but the further it goes up, the better the value proposition in terms of what BIM is. So starting to think about certainty in terms of that entire life cycle process, not just one small part of it. As I mentioned at the start, you're probably thinking, what's Forrest Gump about BIM? But we hear this all the time. We just don't know what we're going to get. We'll go through this design, procurement, construction. We get an asset, and because you've kind of always thought about the form. For them, government departments are now saying, start to think about performance, start to think about predictability, and give that performance I want. And I think that's the big thing that BIM gives you. It's that precision of data that can start to answer the questions in a much more consistent manner, right for that whole life cycle planning. How many people know about government soft landings? Again, show of hands. I think it's good. I'm quite pleased there's a bit more, but as part of the government construction strategy, there is one called government soft landings, and it's not just at that point between construction operation. It's right for that entire asset life cycle, but it starts to bring about BIM in terms of care of assets, but also in terms of asset information modelling or asset care. And soft landing is that, if you like, that golden thread. Government soft landings became policy on the 20th of September. We do have a framework in place, so we will now have to start thinking about, both in parallel, about data right through the entire project life cycle. What does that start to look like? Well, I'll not take you right through the full thing, but you will be able to download this from the government BIM website. But it's very much about getting the FM contractor involved right at the very outset to help set the brief that looks at how this is going to be performed, how it's going to be operated, starting to test the model from an FM point of view, and start to look at post-occupancy evaluation. I think the key thing for me is the fact it ties it back, start to review it and feed back that in-use data. Start to get asset knowledge, if you like, real asset knowledge in terms of how does an asset actually perform, what did we learn from it. I think the big problem to some extent about BIM though is when people have looked at it, the value proposition has always been through the lens of the designer, the contractor, and it's always looked at things like the digital tool set, the whole digital design, digital construct. But actually for us, the big prize in terms of BIM is pretty much below the water. The data gives us more understanding and surety. And if you get more understanding and surety, you make better decisions. You make better decisions, you can start to rehearse it better, and actually kicks off more investment. You start to manage the risk. And ultimately, as I say, we want better outcomes. We want better business outcomes, social outcomes, as opposed to better models. The models are a nice part of it, but we're conscious that rubbish is still rubbish. You still get good quality data, good quality decisions. Good quality decisions give us better outcomes. So it's very much key to getting that data right and the quality of the data within the models. Huge classroom in the UK, probably between 3.5 and 4 million people that are already embedded within industry. People that come out from university, they get this, they collaborate, they're very good at it. But we've got two things. We've got knowledge, this pink part here, and we've got the digital tool set. I think we get kind of too hung up on the skills in terms of the keyboard, but we've got to start thinking very much in terms of knowledge. If you're a business leader, an owner of your company, you want to know what it is, how does it affect me? You go down the next layer, managerial. It's about process. What process do I have changed to start to unlock these new ways of working? And it's really, once you get to technical, is more and more about the skills in the digital tool set. There's still a large knowledge piece. So getting the balance between knowledge and skills in BIM is essential. And what we see, there's a big part that goes right down the middle, which is BIM 101, that no matter where you are in the supply chain, you've got to understand the very basics about BIM and how it affects you. And we've got a piece of work at the moment called, we call it the BIM Body of Knowledge, that's going out to the education and training providers to ensure there's a consistent piece of work in terms of what that looks like, that framework. As I mentioned, this is very much a 360-degree process in terms of how we start to use the data within the models. We start to refine the data in use, we start to feed it back, and that starts to give us that whole optimal asset performance. But to do that, we need something, and that's pretty key for us, is having a common language. And that common language, well, you think others kind of do it. Steve mentioned it, and we see it with our BIM for retail partners, the electronic point of sale. Saturday morning, Liz from the CIC goes in and buys her, champagne, Liz, is it still? Buys her champagne, she scans it. That piece of data is then used by the supermarkets because they've got a common language to make smart procurement and investment decisions. Give them clarity and confidence. And we've got to do the same over here. Have a common language that we can start to do the same with. The common language, Kobe UK 2012, is an information exchange. It takes data from one place to another in a common language. And for us, it's very much, we are agnostic as government. We are not asking for any particular technologies. But this common language lets us do many things for it. The first thing is reusability. One input, we can use it many different ways. We can take the data from operational to FM, but we can also start to feed it into reports. We can also start to check the quality of the data within it as well. Just because we've got data doesn't mean it's right. We can start to check quality, and as I mentioned, interoperability, one format, many, many different paths. What does this all start to look like? Well, what does actually government want? We're actually looking in terms of our jigsaw. We want the 3D file formats. We want them in the native file, so that will be the architectural model, the structural model, the services model. But we also, as we said, we want the 2D as well, the reviewable 2D data cut from the models. But the key part for us is we want it in this structured manner. You can start to see the breakdown, the hierarchy of COBie, which then, as you can see, it can come down to many ways. It can be in a package, there's many packages out there support it, or it can come down to a database. Many different ways of doing it. But the good thing, by going to that sort of format, it means the supply chain can start to feed into that process right the way through the data structure. So COBie, if I think of that as a common data set for government in that structured manner, and we'll show an example in a minute. Key thing as well, in terms of it creates that perfect landing, we can start to harvest all that information. We've got the common language, we take the data from the model, and we pull it right into that asset information model. And government has at least 20 different pieces of CAFM software we need to do that with. So having that common language is certainly key. And then that means for us that we can start to get those assets to perform optimally. You probably can't see it, but we do have a use for this. You know, it's just a case of asking for data. Bit of hierarchy down at the bottom, at full atomic detail, we can use it to look at systems and start to look at in terms of that asset, right down to that very much component assembly level. The next level up, cut it in a different way, we can start to think at forward planning, right all the way up till we start to make strategic decisions right up at treasury level. So one data set, cut in different ways, can answer many, many different questions for us. This is what it looks like. We won't go right through the whole process, but this is PAS 1192. If you sit in the helicopter and float right above it, some of the key features to it, you will see it, 360-degree process. It starts with the end in mind. It starts up in that top right with the employer's requirements. What do I want from BIM? What English language questions do I want it to answer for me? And you can see these red and green footballs, which are series of data exchanges. These are the points that the client wants his question answered. So stage around about data drop 2, and it's maybe our tender question: can I afford it? What does my, what does it look like in terms of carbon? It starts to, if you like, validate the business case. And then it starts to move, if you like, from operation right the way in construction. We get the perfect handover, and you can start to see our feedback loop. So a complete 360-degree process using the data to answer questions for the client. So if you do one thing, start to get to know what this PAS looks like as well. And you can start to see how PAS, these data drops, if you like, these interchanges, answer the question. And what happens is you start to see the data comes into the model in very many different ways. And by using that common language, it can come in quite efficiently. It might even just be a simple template from a product manufacturer. So we think we have a degree of simple elegancy in terms of the program and how we want to get data moving in and out these data exchanges. Our very first job, Ministry of Justice, the very first thing we said, and as Steve said, we didn't talk about technology. We said, can we see your process right through that entire project lifecycle? And I'm sure, like most clients, they had them in their silos. So the first thing we've actually done was start to think about business planning. And so go back one. You can start to see up at the top, this is their entire, we actually replanned their whole system with them, and they're probably about 10 metres along that wall. We start to see their process, so actually leaned their process to them. If we stopped at that point without doing any of the technologies, there was still a heck of a lot of value in it. We then said, well, where do you start to make decisions? You can see these red dots that were key decisions for them in their process making as they had tried to procure and operate that asset. And they actually then said, well, at that point in time, you've got to answer some fundamental questions. You can start to see these matrices of the English language questions they need to validate, which then tied in some data hierarchy to it. So that formulated for them, the Ministry of Justice, their BIM strategy for them at a departmental level. We then went out and we stress tested it in the very first BIM project, which was Cookham Woods, a £20 million new build prison project. It's now been tendered. Interserve won the project. They've done the first 2 data drops, if you like, data drop 2B, where it went out to tender, and they've now done the GMP with it. What I will say is all 5 tenderers did manage to respond in terms of the BIM requirements, which was fantastic. What did that look like? The very first drop, what we found is we're guilty of giving our clients too much information, but what we found, right amount of information, the right time that can answer the questions was fine. You can start to see these quite chunky, if you like, graphical blocks, answer questions in terms of adjacencies and massing. And then that's all they needed. And they're saying, sometimes I don't want to know about the door closer at this early stage of my project. I just want to answer some fundamental questions. And you start to see, using the COBie data set, we cut some things out of there. The data sheets looking at functionality, performance, and environment. The next stage, data drop, we had a data drop 2A and 2B. 2A was on out to tender, 2B was what we got back. We looked at the delta, you know, had the contractor given the client what they wanted. And you can start to see in terms of a schema, and this is round about REBA Stage D, whatever REBA Stage D is. I'm sure it'll be something new next year when they got the new numeric form. But you start to see we're starting to populate with some of the furniture, some of the generic furniture is going there. When it comes back to the contractor, it's then populated with something specific to them. And we're starting to get more and more data into the model at that point. Data drop free, we're starting to get explicit construction information. We're starting to cut more and more now from the model as we go. And at that point, we're around about REBA stage. Well, we've moved on one. But at this point in time, data drop 4 up to REBA stage K, we're starting to take all the information right the way through. So we're well on now with MOJ. The first project's out, and we're starting to test more with them. So with MOJ, BIM-enabled team, we help them, but they are, through training, starting to become BIM indigenous. They don't need the help of the task group as they start to move forward. We met with P21 yesterday, starting to get them. We're on the journey of the Highways Agency. So having tested and refined the model is very much starting to make that real. And we've got a team of at least now 6 support officers via the CIC starting to help the government department. So we stress tested the level 2 model. You can see, if you like, the data drop, the English language questions that need validated, and it starts to pull it all together. We've now been through that with soft landings. The 2 of them are lined up in terms of data drops. And you can start to see in terms of a linear project with the Highways Agency. So it works exactly the same with a linear project as well. Same model. Some of the data exchange projects, they just move, determine the procurement route, but exactly the same model. We've learned our lessons, we've refined the model. Just to finish off in terms of, you know, what's our experience been, you know, okay, what? I mean, if people that are maybe starting on their BIM journey, the first thing you've got to ask is, what does BIM mean to you and to your organisation? You know, where's it going to bring you value? You know, where's it going to start to bring your clients value as well? How's it going to start to make you more efficiency? What does that commercial overlay start to look like? Start putting what we're doing, but also look at it through your own lens as well, through that other side of the telescope. How will it help you win more work? And a bit like government, what questions do you need? I'm sure you've got a process as well that needs data to start to validate it. And start thinking about, you know, what workflows start to change, the process change. If you apply BIM to your same process, you probably won't get any changes in terms of output. The inconvenient truth, investment in technology, start thinking about that as well. The reality is you probably already have, if like a footprint or a starting point, you have a baseline, and it's thinking about moving away from that. But think about it very much in terms of outcomes. What do you want to do from it? The reality is many folk won't create models, they'll just maybe want to exchange data or actually view a model. And start thinking about it in terms of your outcomes and purpose. The other thing as well, this is a change program. Start identifying who are the agents for change within your organisation. Get them enabled, get them firing up, help bring people together. As Steve said, this is about sharing, about bringing community. It's easier to do it when you start to bring people together. Join the dots. Where's the supply chain in the journey? Help them. This is something that you can't do in isolation. Start to think about the data. Who manages the data? What systems do you use? Start to create your BIM strategy, this change program. What does it look like? Do you start to use a project execution plan? It's key that you can start to communicate what you want to do in terms of BIM. Have a look at PAS 1192 Part 2. Have a look at COBE. It's going to be about, so it's not going to go away anywhere. Have a look on the BIM Task Group website. Start to get all this information. It's all there. It's all free. Start to look, get understanding in terms of that knowledge piece that we took about. If anything, have a look at our website, www.bimtaskgroup.org. All that information, indeed a lot more, is on there. What we think we are at is this moment. We think we're on a cusp of the industry changing. We think BIM, if you like, is a great opportunity to improve our industry, nudge it to the right-hand side, make it safer, make smarter decisions, and probably change the whole image of how we look. We think we're a great opportunity, and we as a BIM Task Group look forward to working with the hubs and the people in the room to actually make this real in terms of the UK. So thank you. You've heard our story. Cheers.